Welcome. I just need to take a breather. I was gently reminded before I got on the live stream today that other people don't always like what it is that I have to say. So there's that. Oh, it's good to be with you all. I hope you have something warm to drink. Oh, the sound is low. Well, let's try that. I have been working with the sound just a little bit. Keep me posted. Let me know if that is any better as we're going through the conversation. But it is good to be with you all. Today's been crazy. I'm having to take a big, deep breath. We launched episode 2 of Academic Article Monday this afternoon. Technically, it went out. So if you aren't yet subscribed to the Patreon account, go check it out. At least become a free member, because then you'll be notified when articles do get posted. Trying to work a little bit more exclusively with kind of one platform to provide the content and the stuff for you all, the members. So with that being said, this is episode 9, and I felt very compelled that I needed to get this out today. It has been far too long since we've done the last episode. We've got some exciting things coming down the pipeline with live interviews next week. In fact, if you're subscribed to the channel, the YouTube channel, you will get probably already notified that we have a live stream next week with Ryan Day. You're not going to want to miss that at all. And then the following week, we get to welcome back Dr. Jerry Gladson to the show to work through some additional things in Daniel. We're going to be in chapter 8. We're going to be working through. I would encourage you to pick up his commentary if you haven't already. Begin to read through kind of his perspective on authorship and kind of the historical aspect of the book of Daniel. And then read his chapter on Daniel 8, and you will not be disappointed. So we're going to be working through that. But today, ironically, we are in chapter 8. We are in episode 9 of this rebuttal series. And for those of you that are newer, what we like to do is I will initially play a clip. This will be about a 4-minute clip that we'll watch. And then I will we're going to specifically engage in one aspect. If it's a little bit of a nuanced aspect of this 4-minute clip. Some of the things that are said in the clip we've already dealt with in the previous 2 episodes. Some of the things that do get stated or get kind of dealt with offline a little bit or kind of side topic, will get dealt with in future episodes, because this is episode 9. We have 20 of these that will be launched when we're all done. So without any further ado, grab something good to drink and enjoy the video. Here we go.
There's nothing that exists that points to that. But what does it?
Oh, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Here we go.
ChatGPT, AI. It's like there's nothing that exists. There's nothing that exists that points to that. But what does exist is that 2,300 years makes a lot more sense, because that actually points to the 70 weeks being cut off as a part of it.
Yeah.
It makes the most sense. Yeah. Last point, and then I promise.
Okay, so just real quick, he mentioned the 70 weeks. We aren't going to deal with that today. But I promise you, it'll be in the next couple of episodes that we're going to deal specifically with the 70 weeks aspect of their argument.
I'm done. This is the last thing that they say. Well, this thing has to last 2,300 days. Does it really have to last 2,300 days? Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint turned to spake. Let me speak English. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. They say, well, you see, this whole trotting underfoot is going to last 2,300 days. If you start from the time of the decree, there was no trotting underfoot at that time. But yet it says it's going to last 2,300 days. And this is when I use Young's literal translation. Yeah. Notice the original language, what the real question is. And I hear a certain holy one speaking, and a certain holy one saith to the wonderful number. That's another title for Jesus Christ, by the way.
Come on,
who is speaking. Till when is the vision of the continual sacrifice and of the transgression and astonishment to make both the sanctuary and a host treading down? And he saith unto me, till evening morning, 2,300.
Yeah.
What is this? What is the difference in the language? Till what point does this end? It's not the same question was, how long will this be happening? Till what point does this vision end? It doesn't necessarily have to mean that something is happening every single day of that vision. But he's asking, what year is this going to end? And he says, evening and morning, number 2,300.
Come on.
It's like saying, what year does Randy graduate? 2028. It's not saying that he's doing something every year. The point is, friends, the question is, till when? When does this whole thing wrap up? And he's saying the 2,300 evening and morning, which means the 2,300 day. That's when this prophecy is going to wrap up. It does not mean that something is happening throughout the whole time. And this is where people...
All right. Wow. It's the 23rd hundred year is what Jason claimed. Okay. Here's the, we have a lot to talk about. Here is the argument that I'm specifically there's a lot that we could deal with in this. Okay. But here's the argument that we're specifically going to deal with. Here's what Jason claimed. Okay. Daniel's 2,300 evenings and mornings should be interpreted as 2,300 years. There's a whole reason why they do that, okay? But they claim it should be interpreted as years that mark the end point of the entire prophetic vision, not the duration of a specific Antiochene persecution. Now they go on. That's the first part of their argument. And if you notice, Jason said, let's go to the Hebrew, okay? So Jason claims that the Hebrew asks, and I'm quoting here, till when does this vision end? Now, Jason goes to the Young's literal for this to find the Hebrew. Okay, again, we're gonna go to the Hebrew, but he never goes to the Hebrew, okay? Till when does this vision end, rather than how long will this persecution last? Therefore, based on what Jason thinks and the Adventist system thinks, one must reject the Antiochene interpretation as technically, they claim, biblically inconsistent, is what Jason claimed. Now, there's a couple of things that Jason's arguments dealt with, okay? Part of what I want to do here is I want to be very clear on what I heard Jason say specifically. And the reason why I'm dealing with this, those of you that are newer, okay, is Jason is a part of the Adventist Defense League. Adventist Defense League, all of the guys on the Advent Defense League, not Adventist, the Advent Defense League, ADL, are supposedly Adventists in good standing. And because they're Adventists in good standing, they supposedly represent the Adventist position honestly and well. Okay. Now, whether or not they do or don't is again neither here or there. My task is to either agree or disagree and provide rebuttals to what it is that was claimed. So I need to go through. I'm going to go through first and share with you what his arguments are. Okay. First of all, Jason made an attempt at what would be a linguistic argument, an attempt. Okay. If you caught in the video, he said, I'm going to go to the Hebrew, and then he uses the Young's literal translation, and he argues that because YLT, Young's literal translation, says it a certain way, specifically, till when does this vision end? He never actually goes to the Hebrew, by the way, okay? But because of this, it's until the end of it's the end of the vision. He's seeking an endpoint. It's not what goes on during the long persecution. That's not why. In other words, it's not asking about duration. It's asking about, like, at what year is the vision going to end? That's what Jason's argument is. Okay. And he claims it's, 2300 evenings, mornings converts to years, which converts to ends in 1844. That's the Adventist argument, okay? And that's where he's going. That's what he's saying. The second thing he does is there's chronological coherence in what he's trying to claim. Okay, he claims specifically that 2300 years, he says it makes a lot more sense because it allows the 70 weeks of Daniel 9 to be cut off as a part of the actual, like, overarching 2300 years, creating what he believes to be some sort of a unified prophetic timeline. Okay. Now, I told you this, I'm not going to deal with the 70 weeks in this episode. That's going to actually be episode 11, where we're going to specifically deal with, and we may even get into some of that when Dr. Jerry Gladson is on as kind of a part of the conversation. We'll see. The third kind of thing that I want to point out is that he does this rejection of any kind of alternatives. And this is true for the Adventist position. If it's not their position, they're just going to reject anything that isn't theirs because theirs is superior. Okay. He argues that the Antiochus understanding clearly in his mind fails because, they can't consistently account for 2300 literal days, and this is where they go. Literal days of persecution under Antiochus, okay? And that is, let me just say this, that is a completely fallacious and biased statement. He makes this like, I went and tried to find, AI couldn't say anything. No one says anything. Josephus doesn't. He goes on, and that was in kind of the earlier part of the video, right before we got into the main part. So I just want to say right off the bat, okay, that last idea, this 2300 literal days dealing with the persecution under Antiochus, or anything literally dealing with the persecution of under Antiochus, that absolutely is historically based. And so his statement on that is just completely fallacious. Now, I'm going to explain why some of these details are the way they are. But I want to just explain why Jason, in my opinion, my perspective, why Jason gets to the conclusion that he does. Besides the fact that it's just the Adventist position and he has to argue certain kind of loopholes to jump through in order to get to where they need to go, Jason fundamentally believes, and I say Jason because he's Adventist. If you're Adventist and you're an Adventist in good standing, you're going to believe this, okay? In Daniel specifically. Jason believes that the statement in the text that says, "Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." This is actually Daniel 8:14 specifically, and that's where we're going to be today for the most part. The NRSV UE says, "Then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful position." The text that that we're dealing with, and we're going to deal a lot with today specifically, is this. Then the sanctuary shall be restored. Okay. And that's going to be predominantly what we're going to be kind of honing in on. What Jason says is that this phrase, the sanctuary being cleansed, cannot refer, it's impossible in his mind to refer to the Maccabean rededication of the Jerusalem temple. And part of the reason why the Adventist position is this way is because the verb sedc, okay, the verb for cleanse or rightful state is where we're going to be specifically going. This verb itself means to justify or to make righteous, not to purify. That's his argument. Okay, so the passage in an Adventist mind and in Jason's mind, this passage it must deal with, and it's really important that we understand this as we're engaging, it must refer to a heavenly sanctuary. That's what it has to refer to in the Adventist construct that's being justified in some sort of a final eschatological sense. And they would argue that, there's no way that it can be Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes because, well, that didn't happen until long after. That's the argument. Now, Jason's conclusions and his claims in the Adventist position really presses on the lexical range of the Hebrew word sedc. And so we're going to deal with that. We're going to engage in it. We're actually going to go to the Hebrew. Jason never did. In fact, I don't think he ever did in the video, the 38-minute video that we're kind of piecing, taking apart and kind of ripping apart. But we're going to actually go there. We're going to go to the Hebrew. We're going to talk through it today. A couple of things precursor is, I would say, the Antiochus defense rests on three pillars. The first pillar is kind of what the Hebrew actually expresses, which we're gonna get to. What does the Hebrew say? Okay. The second main thing is the ritual-judicial overlap of this particular verb, as we look at it, is very clearly biblical Hebrew. So there's an overlap between ritual and judicial when it comes to this verb sedc. And then the third pillar is the historical realities of the temple's vindication after Antiochus's desecration. Now, just as a precursor for future episodes, when we get there, desecration doesn't necessitate destruction. Okay, for something to be desecrated, it doesn't necessitate that it has to be like obliterated or completely annihilated or, what we would think like destroyed in that terminology. And again, a lot of this is seeking to express what the Hebrew does say or possibly says and not extend too far into what we might think it means or what would be past the meaning of the Hebrew text itself, okay? And yes, that is true. I don't disagree with you on that. Antiochus did not destroy the temple, and that's one of my points, is that the text does not necessitate destruction, but it does necessitate desecration. And so this is all in the language of the text. Again, these are some of the reasons why I hold some of the positions I do. I'll say this in the beginning. You don't have to agree with me. Okay, I'm not looking for you to agree with me. My job here is to rebuttal or refute what it is that's being presented in the video and give you reasons why I hold to some of the things that I particularly ascribe to. So let's kind of investigate. Let's dig in. Let's see what the text says, and let's get to the meat of this. So we're gonna be highly focused this episode on this word for cleansed. Now, I'm going to do this. I am going to come in here and I want to walk through a couple of different versions of the text. The first one we were looking at, which is I primarily study in the NRSV UE, the updated edition. Part of the reason for that is because it gives me access to some of the deuterocanonical books in my study. But here you'll have, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. If you go to the Lexham English Bible, verse 14 says, then the sanctuary will be restored. Let's keep going just a little bit more. This is the NASB 2020. It says, then the sanctuary will be properly restored. Now, if you go to the King James Bible, you'll get the famous word that most Adventists connect. And I'm actually going to engage in a really important scholar in the Adventist circles today. I'm going to give my best attempt at it anyways. So then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. This is the word, okay, that we're dealing with. You'll see the manuscript transliteration here. We're going to deal with this as sedc, okay? And this is the word that we're going to be dealing with. So cleansed is one way that it gets translated. In the NRSV, it's going to be, shall be restored to its rightful state. It's a lot of words to try to get there. Now, I know that Jason primarily engages in the until when in his understanding. Until when? So he's looking for, like, what's the year? That's his kind of argument. What's the year that this is going to take place? Now, we already dealt with, if you haven't watched episodes 7 and 8, we already dealt with the temporal parts of the arguments. 100%, you are absolutely right. They are still date setting. It's kind of a built-in Seventh-day Adventist kind of DNA construct inside of the system. So we already dealt with those in the previous two episodes, chapter 7 and 8, or episodes 7 and 8. What I will show linguistically today that the Adventist interpretation of 2300 being years, because at the end point, that's their idea. It has to be 2300 years because at the end point, the sanctuary begins its cleansing. That's like 1844, October 22, 1844. They start at 457 AD. That's their whole premise, right? So if they get the start date wrong, if they don't convert from evenings, mornings to days, if they miss, in fact, in one of their interpretations early on, they missed the conversion from BC to AD, and so they lost a year, and then that screwed things up. And again, we shouldn't be doing this anyways. This is not the way this type of apocalyptic literature functions, is by predictive numerology. But this is required for the Adventist system. And it's required because you have to get the 1844 to deal with the change in sanctuary transition, not the earthly, but the heavenly, to get to the what leads into their investigative judgment heresy. Now, if we deal with the text, this just doesn't work, okay? You have to twist it, you have to massage it, you have to make specific interpretive decisions and hurdles to even get close to that type of an argument, okay? So let's dive in. I want to look at the text, okay? It says, until he answered them for 2,300. I'm used to saying until because that's the predominant text of how the Adventist understands it. For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. This word right here, okay, in the language, is the nesdek or sedc. the verb that we're going to deal with today. Now, I want you to notice something in particular about this particular Hebrew word. This Hebrew word I've put into, actually, I want you to pay attention here. We're going to deal with the nefal stem in just a second of the language, but the lemma itself is this is in Logos. This is a Bible study word study kind of platform or tool. And this is showing you this particular word, sedc, how that gets translated in whatever version that I'm in. So I'm in the NRSVUE, and what the English words of that Hebrew lexical term, how it gets translated. Okay. Now this is in all passages. So this is going to show you all the Hebrew text. I want to go specifically to Daniel real quick. And I want you to notice that there are two instances. You can see the little two right there. There's actually two ways it gets translated. You have who led to righteousness and restored. Now the two locations are actually, here's the two locations. You have Daniel 8:14, which is the text we're dealing with. Daniel 12:3 is the other location in Daniel for sedc. Okay. Now, the common Adventist response to this, and it's been pretty popularized by a scholar by the name of Roy Gane, that there is what they call linguistic connections to the same idea in Leviticus. Now, I'm going to go to, I just want you to see this, okay? You see that in all, if I go to all of the passages, we have 41 references where this Hebrew word, we don't care about the English. The Hebrew word shows up for sedc. And that's going to be in lots of different kind of contextual structures. You see it in Job and Psalms and Isaiah. It shows up with righteous. It shows up vindicating, vindicated, justified, justify. You'll see, again, Psalm. It shows up in Kings and Chronicles. And I mean, there's lots of places that it shows up. Here's Exodus 23. Acquit. I will not acquit the guilty. Isaiah 5:23, Genesis. There's lots of places that this shows up. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Because the discussion that Adventists like to say is, see, there's linguistic connection to Leviticus. Now, I want you to notice on the screen, how many times in Leviticus does this word get used? You just have to look right up on the screen right here. And I'm going to go to a couple different, okay, this is the NRSV. Let's just go to, let's go to the NIV, okay? How many times does it get? None, okay? And again, we don't really care about the English per se, okay? Because we're technically dealing with the original language here. I'm going to go to the King James, the 1900 edition. How many times does the King James have sedc in the text? 0. I want you to see this. 0. It does not show up, this word, the lexical word that's in Daniel 8:14. Now, that's not the entire argument, okay? I just want you to see that. I want you to notice that. Now, this will become very important for why we deal with and argue the way we're going to help understand the lexical connections. Okay, so the root meaning, if we go back to the term in question for sedc, specifically in Daniel 8:14, the root meaning comes from an idea of to be in the right, to be justified, to be declared righteous. That's the root meaning of what is happening. Now, I'm going to put on the screen, bear with me. This is going to be a little bit more of a Bible study today of walking through some of this. I'm going to put the NRS, VUE up again. I'm going to go to Daniel. Actually, I'm going to do all passages real quick. And I want to see if there's anything in Deuteronomy. Now, there is one verse in Deuteronomy where we can see this is a common, this is a judicial context. Why do I say judicial? Well, let's just read the text, okay? Suppose two persons have a dispute and enter into litigation. It's judicial. Very clearly, the context of the words that are being used deal with a judge, litigation. There's two parties. Like, we're dealing with some sort of a judicial context, okay? So Deuteronomy does have one time where this word, and there it is, sedc, okay, this word, is used in a judicial sense. However, by late biblical usage, sedec can also mean, and predominantly means, to be vindicated, to be proved right, to be restored to its rightful position. Now, I have said this before, and I'm gonna beat this drum until it's dead. Context is everything. When you are trying to understand what the word means, and you're translating into not only a different language, but a different historical time period. That's what English is today. You're thousands of years later. You know, words have a crazy way of traveling. So when you're trying to explain the concept of an ancient word, context is everything. You have to make sure that you're paying to context. And when I say paying attention to context, I don't just mean the words before, the words after, or the chapter. And that plays a role. But I'm also talking about grammar. I'm talking about syntax. I'm talking about the historical setting. I'm talking about the geographical setting. I'm talking about authorship. There's so many different. I'm talking about the context that created the very thing that we're reading, which is an ancient text. Now, when we go to, all right, Daniel 8:14. Now, this is going to be a tad bit difficult to show. I'm going to encourage those of you watching, scan the QR code in the corner. Technically, I think I got to point this way because my lens is mirrored. But scan the QR code and join the Discord server to have like follow-up questions on this. Because what most of us don't understand, unless we get into the actual original language itself, is we don't deal with the grammar inside of the language itself. So this particular word that gets, here's the transliteration, sedec or nisdek. This is what's called a nefal stem. Now, some of you are like, I don't even know what that means. Why does it matter? Okay, this is, you remember back in the day when you were in English class and you were trying to deal with direct objects and like where things point and how things work and all that stuff, okay? If you take a Hebrew course on how the language works, which, by the way, I'm not a Hebrew expert, okay? I want to be very clear on this. I do consult with Hebrew experts by the resources I use, and I am in my master's course right now. Will begin my language kind of 2.5-year journey where I will have 4 semesters of Hebrew and 5 semesters of Greek. So if none of this really matters to you, it matters for the context of what we're exploring, what we're trying to dig into. In Daniel, we have a particular stem that is a part of the word itself. Okay, so here we have the word, you'll see right here. The word itself, you'll see it down here as the lemma. And you see this tiny little, it looks like a reverse upside down, like a reverse L, okay, with a dot underneath it. That is the nefal stem. Now, I'm going to tell you from my research what that is and why it's important. I need you to pay close attention to this. The nefal stem is a significant grammatical formation in biblical Hebrew with nuanced semantic functions. It is one of the 7 major stem formations in biblical Hebrew, primarily signifying a range of semantic relations typically summarized as passive. Now, some of you might say, Mike, this is way over my head. Just bear with me. I promise you the work is going to be worth it. I promise you. In biblical Hebrew, stems convey grammatical voice relationships. The nefal stem, this is one of the 7. The nefal stem serves multiple purposes. It can be a reflexive counterpart to other stems, where the subject of the verb both carries out and receives the action of the verb. And it also occasionally is used for simple passive constructions, where the subject of the verb receives the action of the verb. Now, from a morphological, all that means, morphological is just the grammatical structure of the language. That's all that means. Okay, morphologically, it is indicated by a prefixed none. What is that? The prefixed none is this right here on the screen that I'm circling. I know it's small, okay? This is the prefixed none. It is the very far right of the Hebrew word that's labeled 13. And it's often followed by vowels. Now, what's interesting is that while this pattern is consistent for strong verbs, there are variations with weak verbs. And this is where this gets complicated. It's just not as simple as making clear statements like Jason sometimes does. And it's really irked me in his video, okay? It irked me because he said, well, if you look at the Hebrew, and then he goes to Young's literal translation and doesn't even go to the Hebrew. Like how egregious is that when you're not even dealing with the reality of the structural challenges of the language, okay? So there are different ways of treatment for the verbs with intentional guttural sounds that start with like yod, or those beginning with none. So there's a challenge in kind of how it gets used. The names of these stems are taken from the corresponding forms of the verb. So you have a pa'al, which is like do or make, which adds a fascinating etymological layer to the grammatical structure. Now, if you want to know ins and outs of all of this, okay, you can read. There's Jimmy Parks has stuff with Faith Life, has a Hebrew grammar ontology. Michael Heiser and Vincent Setterholm did a glossary of morphosyntactic database terminology. David Baker has Getting to Grips with the Biblical Hebrew. And I know that's really high level. I get it. Okay, I'm going to try not to stay high level for this. But it's important to understand that that little tiny mark in front is a nefal stem, and it's a resultative passivity, meaning to be made right, to be set right. So therefore, when you have all this together, okay, then the sanctuary will be set right, vindicated, restored to a rightful condition. Now, it does not primarily mean, and this is why I'm getting here. This is like, wow, Mike, you're going into the weeds really fast. The reason is that the Adventist position for their heavenly sanctuary argument is that it has to deal with moral purification. That is not the primary meaning of the text of sedc. That's not. It just isn't. Okay. It just absolutely is not the case. In fact, there is a word for moral purification of sin. And I'm going to show you what that word is in Hebrew. There is a word for this. Okay. The word is tahir or tahar. It's THR. It's what we would get for cleanse. And this cleanse is a ritual cleansing. It's still not like moral in like the sense of like sin per se. It's a judicial covenantal vindication. Okay? It's not a Levitical cleansing in priestly terms. So this translation, and I share this because if the author desired to make the text in Daniel say like cleansing morally or cleansing like from a sin standpoint, from a sanctuary sin, if that's what was going on, there is different words that would be used than sedc. Okay? So you can hopefully understand why some translations, like the King James Bible, for example, who deals with like older English versions, which is interesting because I think Young's literal actually is based on or supportive of the KJV. It's an older language text. And so, I mean, I could see why he would go there. But usually the older English versions of the text, it catches the effect, but it uses words that can easily be misconstrued as connected to other things. Okay, so what captures the word itself, okay, for sedc, this is, it means to restore to its rightful position, and it's the concept of being vindicated to its rightful position, restored. That's what vindication means, okay? Now, I have not yet had a chance to get into this next portion because I haven't had the right space. And I'm going to do my best today to engage in Roy Gane's arguments. Roy Gaines is a very popular mainstream Adventist scholar that quite honestly he's actually a very good scholar in many respects. He's written the Leviticus, I believe the Leviticus commentary for the NIV application set. And, you know, I was dialoguing with Edwin at one point, and Edwin said, yeah, you need to go find the video where we interviewed Roy Gane. Roy Gane's like their go-to person to like, see, he says it, so it's got to be right, and you're wrong. Listen, Roy Gane's one person, by the way. He's one scholar, one person. And there is a plethora of other scholars that will engage in this. And so if you want some of the details on this, I'm happy to send you some of the research. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm going to deal with this particular argument that Roy Gane kind of brings in to kind of address the actual issue at hand. I'm not going to deal with all of what Roy Gane says. I don't have the time or the space here. But I'm going to go through kind of his main arguments. These are the positions that the Adventist scholars will take. The core argument for Gaines is that cleansing or restoration that shows up in the KJV in Daniel 8:14, he claims that it is conceptually, linguistically, and theologically linked to the Day-of-Atonement ritual in Leviticus 16. That is his core argument. Now, I've already shown you like fractures in that argument or cracks in it, okay? But you do have to understand that Roy Gane is, while he is seeking to be a scholar in high regard, as an Adventist scholar, he does have to uphold certain things. Okay, so Gaines believes that Daniel's audience would naturally think of the Day of Atonement when hearing sanctuary or cleansed. That's his argument. And for Gane, the broader context of what he calls cosmic conflict, which again, if you've been an Adventist or know anything about Adventist theology, what that really just means is the great controversy. It really just means it's their entire framework, okay? But the broader context of a cosmic conflict and judgment calls, he thinks it demands for a day-year understanding and the existence of a heavenly sanctuary. Now, you can already see the bias kind of flowing into the argument, but this is his premise behind this, okay? I'll give you a few things from his published works. He claims that the Hebrew term that we're talking about, sedc, okay, nizdak, is conceptually related to her, which is the two things that we looked at, okay? Now, he says that that's the case because vindication or restoration of the sanctuary presupposes cleansing from defilement. Now, that is a bias presupposition. Okay, but his argument there is that, well, they just would have understood it this way. This just would have been. He proposes that the semantic field, right, justify, vindicated, cleanse, restore, like remember all the ways that it gets translated when we looked at that wheel? What Gaines suggests is that the semantic range or the field overlaps both of these passages. So the terms overlap, and because they overlap, see, there's a connection. That's his argument. And he makes, scholarly arguments as to why that's the case. The second thing that he does is he claims that there is a theme of defilement, judgment, and the restoration in Daniel 8. And so Gane argues strongly towards it's reminiscent of the ritual logic of the Day of Atonement. So he's going to pull the Day of Atonement into both of these. Now, why would he think that in Daniel 8:14 this has anything to do with Day of Atonement? There's nothing in the text that says it has to do with Day of Atonement. There's absolutely nothing there, okay? But he's saying that because the words have semantic overlap, that, well, the Jews hearing this, or the Hebrews hearing this, they just would have had that. That would have been there in their minds. Okay. What else he does is he points out Leviticus 16 as the only regular time when the sanctuary as a whole was cleansed and vindicated. Again, I'm hoping you're seeing his bias to where he needs to go. He also claims there's a chiastic structure in Daniel 8. I'm not going to argue that here, neither here or there. Again, literary structure is important. It's great. It doesn't tell you everything, but he claims that the focus of the crisis in Daniel 8 supports what he calls a Day of Atonement motif. And so therefore, all of these things are going to be like filtered through this Day of Atonement motif. Now, if you want to read any of this, you can go, he has a book called Cult and Character, ironically. He's dealing with not like cult, but like Israelite cult, okay? So Cult and Character is a book that he wrote, and then you would also want to go read his commentary on Leviticus and Numbers in the NIV application commentary. Okay, now here's the problem. Okay, so those are the reasons. that Gaines is going to lay out. Here's the problem with Gaines's approach. The problem is that, as you've already seen, Daniel 8:14 has an entirely different Hebrew word than Leviticus 16 for cleansed. Tahor is an entirely different word than sedc. Okay, so that's part of the problem. Sedc in Daniel 8:14, as we can see by other translations and other individuals that are translating what the context of the meaning means, it tends to lean towards restoring to its rightful position. Or restoring what was desecrated. Okay, Leviticus 16 is very clearly used as a purification, as part of the cultic rites that are dealing with the Leviticus 16 context. Okay, so the roots of these words are not synonymous, and they have no overlap in Levitical ritual jargon. They don't have any. You don't use sedc when you're dealing with cultic rituals in the Day of Atonement. You just don't. There isn't any overlap in the actual language. Okay, you can twist the text to kind of, well, it kind of could. Well, yeah, maybe it could, but you can't twist. It's like putting a square in a circle and trying to like force it to become a circle. It's not the way it works. Okay. What happens with Gaines is his approach imports connotations not justified by linguistic usage. Context is always going to derive meaning. And in Hebrew, sedc never, this is a bold statement, okay? And again, if ADL is going to respond to this, if they ever get to it, okay? Because we're at episode 9, they've done one response on the videos. I don't know. I have a feeling they might just give up because I don't think they know how to dialogue on this kind of stuff at this level. But if ADL is going to engage in this, they have to prove from the original language, not from an English version of a Bible, the original language, where sedc deals with ritual purification. It just doesn't exist. Now, to prove my point, okay, and I did this already. You search for sedc in Leviticus, it's not there. Okay, that's an entirely different word. The words don't get used in the same framework. Okay, I'm drawing some comical conclusions here. It very well could be. Maybe they're too busy trying to figure out when the Sunday law is going to happen. Okay, now here's something really interesting. As I was doing my research, we need to note something that even Adventist scholars, other than Roy Gane, actually push back and disagree with Roy Gane. This is actually from an article. Let's see. This is Hans Larondel. This is 2015 in a published work called Articles and Lectures. And it's actually, this will be interesting. This is actually in an unpublished, now it's obviously published in Hans Larondel, but it's not published. In fact, I wonder if I can put this on the screen real quick. I didn't even think to do this on the screen. Let me see real quick. If you just pause for a minute, maybe use the restroom while I go see if I can find this. I'm going to see if I can find real quick. Larondel. Okay, this is Articles and Lectures. Now I'm going to see if I can find, oh, right here. Yeah, I've got it. Adrian, I'll get to that in just a second. Bear with me for just a second. I will go to Job 15. So this is now this is dealing with an Adventist. I don't know that he's a scholar per se. Okay, perhaps no seminary professor in Adventist history has won more respect from Evangelical Academia than the late Hans La Rondelle. So this guy's passed away. This was published in 2015. It looks like actually by maybe his wife, okay? But what's important is this is dealing with, you'll notice in the menu on the left-hand side, this is focus on Daniel 8, and it's specifically under a section that's called Critical Issues of Daniel 8:14. That's what we're talking about. Now, what I want you to notice is this section right here. Now, this comes from, the reason why I was getting here is, notice this is from an unpublished paper called The Problem of Sanctuary Defilement and Cleansing in Daniel 8, pages 12 and 13. Now, those of you that don't know much about the Adventist system or some of the background to the Adventist system with Daniel, there were a lot of academic kind of jargon that went on. There was a lot of research and stuff that happened dealing with the problem of the sanctuary issue. This is some of that you're going to see come to the surface. Okay, there are problems. Honest scholars in the Adventist system will identify and understand these problems. Now, here it is. The Adventist Bible scholar, Dr. Beatrice Neal, admits, here it is is impossible to impose this concept. What concept? Cultic defilement upon the Daniel passage. The Bible never describes the sanctuary as being defiled by the confession of sin on sin offerings. This process of bearing sin, however, is never called defilement in Scripture. So I want you to understand that even now they're going to go on. It is the commission of sin that defiles the sanctuary, not the confession of sin. There's going to be arguments on how what actually does defile. But my point in bringing this into the argument is that while yes, Roy Gane has supposedly an argument, there are lots of committee, lots of people. In fact, Dr. Jerry Gladson's one that was on some of these committees that dealt with some of these challenges in Daniel that have not been solved. In fact, they haven't even been published, okay? And the committee to solve the problem, the Adventist conundrum in Daniel, was disbanded after, I think, just over 2 years, maybe 3 years, of trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So it's funny to me how Roy Gane comes around and like, oh, I've solved the problem, when people could not solve the problem as a committee before. Now, I think Adrian wanted to go real quick. This is a little off script, and that's fine. So let's go to the text. What are mortals that they can be clean, or those born of women that they can be righteous? Now, I don't have in my notes exactly how Roy Gaines uses this. It looks like Adrian, you're making the statement that he uses Job to justify the investigative judgment in Daniel 8:14. By the way, first of all, that's just a stretch. This particular semantic, first of all, this is not, just so you know, this is not the same stem, just so you know. And then secondly, this is to be right is the actual, so here, let me just do this. Let me go to the, well, we can do it here. We were in here. So let's go to all passages. There, let's go back here. All passages. Okay. We already know this is in Job, right? Job 15:17. So Job 15:17, you'll notice the wheel over here. Job 15:17, if you'll notice it in the list on the left-hand side, Job 15:17, let me know when you see it. Job 15:17, does it show up? Does it? Does it? Does it? Job 15:14 shows up, but not. Okay, so this actually, I want you to notice the difference. While this is the lemma, this is a different stem. So there'd have to be, I think it's a stretch to claim that this is the connection. This is not the same. This is yesed. This is not, what's the best way to show this? Let me duplicate this. I'm just thinking off the top of my head to show the differences here. Daniel 8:14. Okay, I want you to notice down here. Okay. Okay. You see in the manuscript transliteration, this is nisdek and this is yisdek. Okay, it's the same lemma. Okay, but remember the stem drives the interpretation, or helps to understand the connection for the verb and where that verb is supposed to go. This has a different stem. In fact, the stem is a yiktol stem, and the stem in this Daniel 8 is the nefal. So it's an entirely different stem that grammatically points you in a different direction. Okay, so again, that wasn't in my notes, but hopefully that helps to clear up. I don't think there's a good reason to connect that. I don't think that's a valid reason personally, but I get that he's trying to find the right connections to force his point. Okay, now as we finish this is kind of a part of the critique on Roy Gane's position. I just want to be very clear on something, okay? Just because I want to be very cautious in that I don't want you all to think that just because a scholar makes a conclusion means that everything they write is horrible. Gaines is actually one of the better Adventist scholars out there. There's a couple of them actually that are like, wow, they've got some stuff that, and in fact, it's better. The work is better for scholars that publish things outside the Adventist publishing houses. Okay, because we know that there's a little less dependency on it having to be Adventist per se, even though we all know that Gaines is an Adventist scholar and he's going to obviously put his twist on it. So I want to say that Gaines he's actually a good scholar for the most part, and he does good work for the most part. But it's okay when you study scholars' kind of interpretations to be cautious. That's okay. Okay, hold them at arm's length and let the research do its deal. Okay, I would put a word of caution out there that while Gaines does argue for what he calls synonymous parallelism between these two Hebrew words in these texts, this actually represents a methodological choice. In fact, scholars do this. If they're writing for an Adventist commentary, they're going to make methodological or theological leaps and jumps to explain how that denomination interprets what it is that they're engaging in. Okay? This is why I don't tend to pay attention, at least not in the beginning, to scholars that are denominationally bound, unless I'm looking for the arguments in that denomination. Okay? Gaines's argument, very clearly, his framework favors Adventist theology. It's just very, very clear. And he favors it over dealing with the linguistic issues and stuff in the text itself. So the semantic connection or overlap that Gaines proposes, it's it isn't impossible, but it requires that you have to accept his interpretive framework. The Adventist, you have to agree with the Adventist framework in order to buy into and justify and see where he's going. That's just the way it is, okay? Okay. Let's get back into the rebuttal. How's that? We are an hour in, and we've dealt with Roy Gaines. I'm not here to refute Roy Gaines entirely, but his understanding inevitably does come up. In fact, I was encouraged by Edwin to go watch Roy Gaines's interaction with ADL on this particular thing. I think it was Roy Gaines. It might have been Richardson. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember off the top of my head, but inevitably that's the place that they go. Okay. Okay, so let's get back into the rebuttal. So let's look at the contextual meaning of Daniel 8. The context of Daniel 8, 11 through 13. Even against the prince of the host, it acted arrogantly. It took the regular burnt offerings away from him and overthrew the place of his sanctuary because of the wickedness. The host was given over to it together with the regular burnt offerings. It cast truth to the ground and kept prospering in what it did. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke. By the way, if I remember right, Jason made a really weird statement. I need to go to Young's literal. Hold on a second. Sorry. I'm all over the place, okay? Let me just go to Bible Young's literal. Where do I have Young's literal? Young. Maybe I don't have it. Hold on. Sorry guys. I'm doing a search real quick. I've got like 903 Bibles. Certainly I have Young's literal. Ah, there it is. Sorry about that. Got all kinds of things showing up. All right. Formatting. Let me turn off some of these things. Okay. Sorry about that. That's fine. Oh, that's funny. All right. So what I don't understand is, okay, did you notice that he said, this is just literally off the cuff. I was remembering he said that. He said, and a certain holy one saith to the wonderful numbered who is speaking. Did you catch that he claimed that this wonderful numbered, that this was, by the way, there is no, oh, is it? Okay. Wonderful number. Did you notice that he actually said that this was Jesus? And I want you to notice something. Again, Jason is clueless. He's clueless. And I don't think he's intentionally clueless. I just wish he would slow down and do some actual study. In the manuscript for this, okay? By the way, this is just one guy. I want you to know about Young's literal for a second. Anytime you pick up a Bible, you need to find out like who it is, okay? This is written by one guy, okay, who translated the whole thing. This is not a committee. This is one individual, okay? So that's one thing to realize. The other thing I would do before I even picked up a Bible like this, I don't know why he went to Young's literal, well, except that it said what he wanted it to say, is I'd go read the translation theory in the very beginning of the Bible. Why are they making certain decisions? Is it dynamic? Is it fluid? Is it word by word? Is it like, what is it? Okay. But this wonderful numbered who is speaking, these are added words, okay, that aren't even in the original language, okay? This is medeber, which would be, what verse is this? This is verse 13, okay? This would be this word right here, who spoke. Like, what? Who in their right mind makes the connection that this is Jesus? Like, what? And I'm not saying that to like downplay, again, to downplay our Savior. Like, there's nothing in the text that says this is Jesus in any way, shape, or form. It's just not there, okay? Now, there are some entities in Daniel that I think might be understood as, I think some have interpreted them as messianic figures. That's questionable, okay? It's just questionable. We'll get to that. But I would also say, you know, even if they did understand it as a messenger or an angel in supernatural form, or maybe the angel of Yahweh or the Son of God or Son of Man, you know, this terminology that would be understood as maybe the way we would see it as Jesus, the author and the audience would have no clue what that even meant. They don't know Jesus. They don't know. They're not even expecting the Messiah in the way that the Messiah showed up. So anyways, I'm rambling now at this point. So let's get back into the text, the context here. The context of Daniel 8:11-13 is not moral guilt. That's not the context of the passage. Instead, it is it's profaning the temple and trampling the sanctuary. Like, if you look at the text itself, okay, cast truth to the ground, like desecrating the temple, overthrew the place of the tabernacle. It's not moral. It's the continual offering is taken away. The sanctuary is thrown down. The host was trampled. All of these phrases deal with profaning, and desecrating of the sanctuary. So the response must be, in my opinion, the response is specifically to the reversal of that profaning, that profanation. Okay? Specifically, what sedc, okay, down here, what sedc would express. That's what that word is, like, to restore what was taken away by the trampling and the profaning. The sanctuary is going to be put right again. It's going to be made right again after being wronged. That's contextually grounded in the text itself. If Daniel had this idea of purification, ritual purification in mind, or that process, or Day-of-Atonement process, he would have used a different word. I say he. The author would have used, use some form of tahor, would probably appear in the text, not sedc. Okay, but this choice specifically underscores the vindication or setting right after the trampling of the sanctuary. It makes complete sense. Okay, it's the reversal. It reflects a judicial reversal of wrongful defilement. Okay? All right. A couple of other things before we close this down. I have talked before about the theological parallels that are going on, theological statements. There is a theological parallel in the text that's happening that would be vindicating holiness. Daniel's words specifically I've mentioned this in several other episodes where we have this biblical idiom that we see transpiring. These Daniel's wording taps specifically into biblical idioms where God's violated holiness or temple is vindicated. It's corrected. It's put in its rightful position when the enemies are defeated. Check out, let's go to Ezekiel. Let's see. Ezekiel, if I can type. I apparently can't type. Ezekiel 36, 23. I will sanctify my name. Okay, this is a wordplay. This is a biblical idiom that's going on. I will vindicate, some translations say vindicate. I will vindicate the holiness of my name, which was profaned. Okay, so you get this profanation, and he's saying, I will sanctify, I will restore, I will consecrate, I will, the verb parallel to sedc in essence is showing divine right triumphing in the presence of desecration. That's an example of wordplay that goes on. Now, again, this is not the identical word, but sedc, or at least a version of it, you see it down here, okay? The other was, let's go back to, actually, let me duplicate, okay? Again, just, I'm having to slow down a little bit so that you all can keep up, okay? Daniel 8, 14. Okay, notice it's not the identical word, okay? It's a different, and this is not, I'm not saying it's the same words. What I'm saying is it's a parallel in a theological idiom where when God's name is desecrated, it is vindicated. It's restored, okay? It's not the identical words that are being used. This is theological parallelism in the text. That's what I want you to see, okay? Not the same words. If you go to Isaiah 26:2, open the gates so that the righteous nation that maintains faithfulness may enter. Okay, here we have righteousness. Okay, it's similar, but it's not the same. Okay, righteousness is equivalent to being restored to its covenant standing. Okay, so there is this theological parallelism that helps to understand that Daniel 8:14 means that the temple's status as the dwelling of the Holy One, the dwelling of Yahweh, has been publicly certified. After it's been desecrated, it is to be publicly certified as right again. It is restored. Okay? Not some sort of cosmic heavenly sanctuary jargon that needs to have moral purification. That's not in the text. It's not there. It's just not present. That is a 1800s post a serious issue with date setting construct from a feeble woman who was mentally disturbed, Ellen White, to try to vindicate their horrible interpretation. I mean, that's just it's the reality of the historical issues of the late 1800s and Ellen White and the start of the Advent movement. Even the idea of a cosmic heavenly sanctuary needing to be morally purified itself brings up all kinds of issues, if that's even the case, because how would the heavenly sanctuary become defiled? How did it become defiled? Why would it have been defiled? If it needs to be restored in some way, how did it get desecrated? I mean, the only things that enter the heavenly sanctuary would be Yahweh, Father, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, okay? The triune God. Like the only thing that enters, that if there was a heavenly sanctuary that they presume to be the case that got defiled, okay, and needs to be morally purified, who desecrated it? Well, the problem here is that the only logical, or one of the logical conclusions that you can make from that is that, well, Jesus is the one that entered, and so therefore Jesus defiled it with the blood of the sinner. That's the way, and that is a major problem theologically, because whatever defiles the sanctuary is equivalent to the Antichrist. The Antichrist defiles God's temple, the sacred space. And so if that's the case, and again, Antiochus is an Antichrist. But if Jesus is the one that brought the sin or the blood of humanity into the heavenly sanctuary and defiled it, then inadvertently Adventists are effectively claiming, without saying it, that Jesus is the Antichrist. And that's horrible theology. Now, they don't believe that, but that's the implications. That's the implications of it. Okay? Now, I've done this before. I'm not going to go through the details, okay? Yes, Adrian, that's exactly right. It makes Jesus the little horn. That's exactly right. So there's a plethora of problems. Now, I understand the reason why someone like Roy Gaines or Advent Defense League, I understand why they're trying to jump through very specific hoops, because it's their way of navigating away from these particular implications of what it is that they're saying, okay? I've said this before. I'm not going to go through it. I've said it multiple times, okay? That the historical application of the restoration of the sanctuary is Hanukkah. And Hanukkah fits the historical reality of what was going on during this time period. Now, I promise I am going to do, it won't be immediate, but I am going to do an authorship and dating of Daniel, kind of a backdrop to understand how that might make sense with regards to the different chapters and what they seem like and all that stuff, okay? But understand that how long until it will be made right, that argument, okay, in its historical application is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the restoration of the temple. It's the rededication of it. First Maccabees 1, 54 to 59. Second Maccabees 6, 1 to 5. Okay? We have Antiochus erects this altar to Zeus, sacrifices a swine on the temple. This is 167. This is the height of the desecration. And that desecration doesn't have to be seen as the absolute destruction. And understand this, okay? Destruction doesn't need to be physically all the rocks of Jerusalem and the temple were like obliterated. But desecration means making the temple unable to worship in. That's the desecration, okay? We have the reversal of this desecration at Hanukkah, 25th day of the 9th month, very specifically 1 Maccabees 4, 52 to 54. It's the dedication of the temple. Okay. I think we've done at least a good enough job at responding to one of the main reasons why, and again, let's just look back at, here, just for the sake of this conversation, what was the claim? The claim was that 2300 evenings and mornings should be interpreted as 2300 years that mark the endpoint of the entire prophetic vision, not the duration of the specific Antiochian persecution. Now, notice that to deal with this argument, okay, To deal with this argument, I specifically dealt with the end, the entire prophetic vision. And to deal with that, you've got to deal with Daniel 8:14, cleansing, and understand that the Adventist position moves in an entirely different direction because they have to get the end to be 2,300 years, the date at the end of that 2,300 years. And that is just fallacious. It's non-biblical. It's not textually driven in any way, shape, or form. And the best way that Jason proved it's not textually there is to just say, hey, we're going to look at the Hebrew text. And then he went to Young's literal. Okay. That was the second part of it. The Hebrew asks, till when does this vision end? Now that till when does this vision end? Okay. I want you to see that is his argument here on the screen is, this is Young's literal. Now, again, this is just manipulating the text is all it's doing, okay? Because if you go to verse 13 in any other version, okay, it doesn't say till when. It says for how long is this vision? Not like what's the end date stamp. Oh, it's 2,300 years from now? No, that is fallaciously wrong. Okay? And it's completely out of context for what is transpiring. Completely out of context. Okay. Well, friends, I hope, let me look at some of the chats before I say good night to all. I would agree that we need to pray for them. They are trying from their heart, but yes, I agree. One of the things that I will say over and over and over again, I think the biggest challenge with dealing with Daniel and the Adventist version of Daniel, their interpretation, is that Adventism is very different in that these verses, Daniel 8, 13, and 14, are the hinges upon which the investigative judgment demands a certain interpretation. And if you don't get Daniel 8, 13, and 14 to be interpreted in a way that moves you toward the 1844, not the earthly temple, the heavenly temple, and that's the starting point for the investigative judgment. And if you don't get that, then you are in all kinds of problems with disagreeing with Ellen White, with their sanctuary doctrine. I mean, it hits on all these other parts of their theological construct. And so because of that, they are going to defend this tiny little thing, even if it's textually just not defendable. And that's the unfortunate reality of the Adventist construct. So we'll see how they respond, if they ever do respond. I'm not confident that there'll be a lot of responses because it's been taking a long time for them to respond. But that's okay. I want you all to know exactly what the arguments are and how to engage in them. So, a couple of things following up. Just don't forget that there are 4 basic things here that I think demand the natural meaning within Daniel 8 is that the Jerusalem sanctuary, not the heavenly sanctuary, the Jerusalem sanctuary, desecrated by Antiochus's crimes, would be vindicated and restored. That's historically, textually, grammatically, theologically, and contextually driven. Looking at the lexical construct of sedc, looking at contextually, the vision concerns an earthly temple that's defiled in history. Historically, the Maccabean rededication marks the exact restoration predicted. I say predicted, depending on how you kind of see when the authorship took place. And then theologically, the parallels that we talked about, right? His tabernacle, his sanctuary's holiness is restored. That is a parallel theologically in Scripture, where if God's place of residence is desecrated, it will be restored. It will be vindicated. And it will be made right before all nations. All right, friends. So that's the end of episode 9. Do me a favor, as was mentioned already, please hit the like button. Like, subscribe, share. Don't forget, I would love for you all to join me on Patreon. I would love for you to scan the code in the upper corner. I said upper corner. Again, I think it's mirrored, so I have to point this way for you guys. It's the opposite direction that I'm pointing. But do check out Patreon, and at least at minimum, do me a favor, friends, at minimum, join as a free member on Patreon so that you'll at least get the free episodes, the things that come out. I would be honored if you appreciate and value what it is that we're doing here. I would be honored for you to support financially. Obviously, not a requirement. Please support me with prayers. Please support the community. Join Discord by scanning the code and joining as well. But thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for spending time. Let me know if you have any questions. Be blessed. Jump into the Word of God. Study diligently. And excited to see you on the next one. Be blessed.